Today we're talking about the top 10 differences between Rove and Gloomhaven. This was a video that was suggested to me by my patrons, and whatever you all want, I will get to eventually. If you check your Patreon messages, you will all see the video of me eating those 112 tubs of strawberry jam. Whatever you want, I do. I'll do it. But if you missed it, I did a playthrough of Rove. What is Rove? This is Rove. Thank you, Room and Board, for covering Rove. Yeah, this is Rove. It's on Kickstarter right now. It is by the creators of the Crimson Scales, which is a Gloomhaven fan-made expansion. Look at that, Crimson Scales. It's on Gloomhaven. It's expansion for Gloomhaven. Wow, 9.3. That's good. Which was a whole big fan-made expansion about Gloomhaven. Muddy created it because they wanted more Gloomhaven. And so then they've been working on their own game, Rove, which, there aren't too many images. Oh yeah, here are the images. There we go. That's kind of what the board looks like. Anyway, I did a playthrough of that on Room and Board with West, and we were talking a little bit in the Room and Board Discord, which is the Patreon-only Discord, and talking a bit about the differences of Gloomhaven. And I was comparing it to Gloomhaven because naturally it should be compared to Gloomhaven. The designer got their start because they are a fan of Gloomhaven. So I wanted to put forward some comparisons that I've noticed and some similarities, I guess, too. We're just talking a little bit more about the mechanics. And now that I've had a bit of time to digest it, and hopefully if you're a big Gloomhaven fan, you could decide on if these will make you more interested in backing or less interested in backing or what have you. So I have a little list off to the side, and I only have 9, so I'm hoping to come up with one as we go through. But number one, the biggest one for me, and this is probably what my quote on the campaign page actually relates to, is the setup time. I love friggin' flip books, and it feels like this is going to be a lot easier to set up. You just flip the map book open, you go to the scenario, and you drop down your little tiles of people. I guess that's similar to Gloomhaven. I really don't like that you have to sort through all the tiles. I think Rove made the correct call here to not do the Gloomhaven thing with all the tiles, because I don't know anybody other than Muddy who maybe created their own Gloomhaven scenarios with their boards, etc. Well, and Furry Fox, apparently. So that's number one, and that really was number one for me. I don't know. I said it somewhere on the campaign page in terms of it being a campaign that you might actually play, because I don't play Gloomhaven. And a lot of that has to do with the setup. And so I think it's really nice that, not just Rove, but there are other games that are sort of iterating on this setup process. And I'm really excited to see, here we go, not overstaying, quick setup. See, I told you I said it. Easy to get to the table. And I think that's a pretty huge difference going to Gloomhaven. That's why Jaws of the Lion, I think, is a better Gloomhaven to get into if you haven't played it yet, because it has that flip book. Or adding in the flip book, which should just be in the main game, feels like kind of a must. So that's our number one, is setup time. Number two has to deal with the character progression. So I have this character up here. In Gloomhaven, you will retire a character. You will retire a character after you hit a certain number of steps. So your secret objective, my secret objective, was to die a bunch of times, which made a great joy for my fellow accompanying campaign partner, and that's why we definitely keep playing it and haven't stopped playing it anymore. But you will go through this to a certain point, and then you will retire. You'll level yourself up to a certain point. You'll retire, and you'll get a completely new class. The difference with that and Rove is that, according to West, these classes will upgrade, kind of like Pokemon, essentially. That you will start out as one version, and then you will move to the next version, you'll move to the next version. So you have these little slots down here that you will evolve into, and I think your abilities, like your base abilities, might get to up level, and you'll get up-leveled cards, essentially. And so you still are going to be playing with the same play style, but a evolved, tweaked, better version of that as you progress through. And that might make you go one way or the other. You might want to do completely new things. I mean, I guess you could do that too. But I think they're really focused on that evolution aspect, and that you start out as one thing and then you move on to the next thing. And so that your familiarity with your character remains a little bit more consistent than Gloomhaven, depending upon what you like. For me, I don't care either way, but I think some people will enjoy that and some people won't. And so that's how your class kind of changes, right? Which I think is a neat idea, and it definitely is a difference from Gloomhaven, which is why I want to bring it up. Now, talking about enemies and fiddliness, this was near the end, but I think I'm just going to move it up just because I have a nicer picture for it. I find the enemy behavior a lot easier to navigate as well. You see these dice, and I think that's going to be changed. This is still like a prototype component. West was saying there's something about dials that they were going to have. It was on two separate parts of the book. You just kind of lay out two books and you're good to go, because like the monsters correspond with it, which I friggin' love. Like, again, with that setup time in Gloomhaven, you'd have to pull out all the individual cards for each individual character, and here it's like, no, this scenario you're facing these people, and this scenario you're facing these people. And while some people may not like that in terms of the idea of a million miles of replayability, I love that because, again, it helps with the setup time. But we're talking about the enemy behavior here in terms of the enemies, they just move towards the closest person. That's it. Gloomhaven, there was a weird thing, and I wish I could get a picture of it. Like, I still know that I'm playing some of the enemies incorrectly because of how they move. Where was that? There's a big old flow chart that you need for Gloomhaven. Like, the fact that I think it may just have to do with the obstacles. And I remembered that the monster, there was this one choke point, and because like the monster should have, like, if it was a real monster, it was a real monster. It's so stupid. But if it was a real monster, like, would have just gone down this path towards and punched this guy in the face. But because somebody else was closer, even though there were a bunch of obstacles in the way, you actually like loop the monster around. It just has gotten a bit confusing for me. Whereas in our playthrough, I really appreciated that the monster just like walks right into the trap. It's dumb. They're dumb, idiot monsters, and you can manipulate them how you will. And that's how I like my monsters. Not complicated, obtuse beings, but just dumb idiots who walk into a straight line. So I really like that. That's our number 3. Number 4 also has to do with the initiative counter. I really like that there isn't really an initiative track for these monsters. You'll take your turn. The monsters will take a turn. I like the variability. Again, like Gloomhaven is a really nice system in terms of all this variability that it offers, but I think like Rove has taken that and then they're like, okay, but like how can we make a game that people might actually play? And so I really appreciate that you just like resolve them in order from top down, boom, 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 every time. You know, it's consistent. You don't have to worry about it. So like that's also a difference, a personal difference. What you do on your turn is also a bit different. Let me see if I can get a shot of a player board here. We'll use this player board. Essentially here, you can see these discs right here, and these are your permanent player actions. So the way Gloomhaven works, you know what Gloomhaven works. You're seeing what the differences here are. You know, you have your hand of cards. You choose either the top or the bottom action. Really like that in terms of multi-use cards. You choose your 2, you choose your initiative, etc. But for here, you always are going to be doing 2 of these basic actions. It's always a thing that you're going to be doing, and you only get to choose 1 card of like special ability. So again, that sort of limits or decreases the decision space, but not in a way that I personally found to be uninteresting. Like the other cards are exciting. You're building up your ether to power those cards, and so you really want to save that up. And you don't have to worry about burning a card for its movement purposes because you need a big movement charge. I mean, I've only seen 2 characters, right? I don't know how the other characters interact, but I like that you have that consistency of like move, heal, attack, do something else. I forget. Another attack? Special thing. You know, like everybody always has those things assigned to them, and like you have them in a little bit in Gloomhaven because all the abilities are kind of around attacking and moving with the dual layer, with the double multi-use cards. But in this one, you have those sort of consistent things, and then you have that other card on the side. And then you're also having those cards to flip over, so the round timer isn't you. It's just an actual round timer that's built in. Let's add that as a difference. Maybe that's my extra one. The round timer in Gloomhaven, it's determined by the scenario and not by the player's choices or the player's classes, right? Because I was playing a character where I had like 12 cards to start in Gloomhaven, and my partner had 8. And so we were essentially determined by his 8 cards because he had left. I mean, he had better ways of reviving them, so that was, you know, it kind of balanced out because Gloomhaven is very balanced in terms of the characters. But there's a difference. I don't know which one I prefer. I really like the decision space of Gloomhaven's multi-use cards. I do. I like that additional complexity, and I do like the little pang of regret that you get when you throw away a card and then you need it like way back when. I think you still can get that little pang of regret with the flipping of the cards. You're just like, oh no, I know what's on that side. I gotta flip it if I really want to use it. It's kind of like it's kind of a bit like the game Obsession I just played, where you have to refresh your workers in order to use them, right? You have to do that do that pre-planning, and you don't always have access to the abilities if you use one now. So they have that similarity, I guess, in common. But I think it's in terms of the actions, the fact that you have those four consistent ones and you're always using two of them and then one of the other, I think that makes for potentially more consistent turns, let's say. So maybe not as large sweeping turns because you won't have this one explosive turn, but you might because of your abilities. But you'll have more consistent turns and consistent abilities, which some people might like and some people might not. I don't know what number we're on. We're on some sort of number. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the modifiers and the differences. And I really like how Rove does this. They, instead of the cards, like the deck of cards with Gloomhaven to modify, they have a dice. But instead of having on the dice, it's like a multi-use dice, because instead of having just like +1, +2, which is a little bit less exciting, you have just the symbols, the ether symbols. And when you roll it, you then compare to like what element you have an affinity with. I think that gets it to be a little bit more thematic too than just like +1, +2. And I like the element of rolling dice to determine that randomness. I found the cards again fiddly. One of the reasons why I just use the app for Gloomhaven. I don't even use the cards anymore. I have a whole section that I'm just keeping in case I sell it, where you just use the cards as they are. It's in a deck box because I don't touch them. And so again, that like accessibility portion of it. Wait, am I supposed to be talking people out of it? It feels like I'm only saying good things. Well, but those are the things that I noticed, right? Like it's easier to pick out those differences and like those little improvements. But I'm supposed to be the don't back guy, so don't get. I was supposed to convince my patrons not to back with this. They asked for that specifically, but that does add in a little bit more unpredictability, right? In terms of Gloomhaven, you have those dice rolls. A lot of the things are determined by that randomness of dice, and in Gloomhaven, you can kind of count things a little bit more, and you have that opportunity to build up your deck and to replace those cards. That's what I really like about Gloomhaven, is that it feels really good as you get stronger and stronger to replace that and to like mitigate that. And I'm not quite sure that exists in Rove, at least from what I have seen. I don't see a lot of that. So there you go. I spun it around for you. You're welcome. But like for me, I don't mind the trade-off. I hope that the progression will increase in a better way from like evolving yourself, and I hope like the actions themselves get better versus the deck. It does feel really good. I'm reliving the high in Gloomhaven of pulling out the cards that you have like modified. I don't know, like getting it to the table is so important for me, and so like I really do like the dice rolling aspect of that. Okay, I'm going to talk about length. Length, what does Gloomhaven say its length is? I'm interested in that. Half hour per player, 60 to 120 minutes. That makes sense, because you don't really ever do true solo in Gloomhaven. You don't really ever do true solo in Rove either. You dual manage characters. I think you have to hold 2 characters for both. Again, it might be a little bit more easy to dual wield with Rove because the base actions play such a key role. And so it's a little bit simpler than managing 2 different like hands of cards. Gloomhaven 60 to 120 minutes. Rove feels like, it says 60 to 120 minutes, so I guess it's kind of the same. What was our we talked a lot in the playthrough because we were just, having fun. Why is there not a link where I can click just for reviews? Meet the Addicts team. I'm not an Addicts team. Oh, it's under rulebook. All right, I'll allow it. So what length is this? This is an hour and 35. However, we don't get to the playthrough really until like 18 minutes in. So we're talking about how to play the game. And then we stop before the final thoughts at like 1:19. So that's about an hour, right? And I guess there's 2 of us. So that, again, 30 minutes per player. So 30 minutes per player. I've only played at a 2-player. Like my demo was a 2-player and playing with West was 2-player. I don't know if I'd want to play it with more than 2 players, to be honest. In either case, right? I don't think I want to play Gloomhaven with 2 players. I don't think I want to play this. I don't think I want to play many campaign games with 2 players. Again, this just kind of feels a bit quicker. You know, maybe it's because I was having a good time with West. That's very well could have been. And I was having like amazing tech woes, like just horrendous, completely awful tech issues. And so still having it be a residual quick play, I don't know. I mean, I did edit the playthrough, so that's what I still have in my brain. It feels like, anyway, it feels like it plays quicker than Gloomhaven. That's what I'm going to leave it as. Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, maybe it plays the same. But I think it plays quicker, but that also could be sort of setup time. At least if we're talking about length, the campaign's shorter, which you may like or you may not like. I think it said it's 60 hours, and Gloomhaven's like 120, obviously. So there's that. I don't know, do they say? 60 hours, yeah, 60-hour campaign. Gloomhaven is at least 100, right? You have 100 scenarios, and each scenario is going to take you at least an hour. I'd say 120. And once upon a time in my life, I was like, more hours equals better. And then I got too many campaign games that I didn't finish. And I said, less hours equals better. I don't know. So there you go. There's a difference. There's a difference in length. It feels like a weak difference, but I'm putting it in there to hit my quota, my arbitrary quota that I made up. And the last one that I will say is in this 60-hour campaign. It's kind of tied in there. There is the concept that the enemies will return as the bigger, badder, stronger one. Now, I don't quite know if this is a good enough difference to include as differences, because in Gloomhaven you essentially have 2 paths, right? You have the I'm being good and the I'm being evil pathway. And if you go to one scenario and you're good, then that locks out another scenario where you're being evil, kind of. But it's a very sort of basic evil good decision-making tree. Like Infamous, the video game. With Rove, I don't think you're going to have that evil good influencing tree, but I have been told that the characters or the enemies that you don't face, they will return in a way that they are stronger and do different things. I like that from a component standpoint, which means you will see and use your components on your playthrough. Kind of like that. I like that there's a bit of a difference there. I don't know how much this difference actually impacts the game, though, now that I think about it. Because like your progression is going to be linear, regardless of what you do. In Gloomhaven, it's going to be linear. Rove, it's going to be linear. For you, right? There are branching storylines. Of course there are. But it will be linear for you. You will choose to make a decision, and you will see the things come back. And I think the difference here is if you're debating between Gloomhaven and Rove, I guess, other than the other differences in gameplay that I mentioned earlier, from like a narrative journey, do you want to have those familiar faces come back, right? Will you see them come back? I mean, I haven't made my way through Gloomhaven's story. I don't know if Jexera you fight Jexera as the final boss or whatever. Isn't she the little person putting a curse on you? I'm like 10 scenarios into Gloomhaven, and that was years ago. I'll be honest. But I played enough to know that like this is clearly inspired by, but also I think a little bit improved upon just in terms of the user experience. I think Gloomhaven is a thing where like it doesn't care about the user experience. It cares about its own mechanics. And it has really, really nice mechanics to interact with if you are able to interact with those. I think with this, it cares a little bit more about the user experience and you actually getting it to the table. But that's a tangent that I already talked about. I do like the fact that you will use all your standees. I think you probably used them all in Gloomhaven as well. So maybe this isn't a difference. Maybe this is a horrible way to end the video. I'm trying to find differences here. Or maybe that's an important thing. Maybe those differences aren't distinct enough for you, right? I think the key to this is that if you have Gloomhaven or Frosthaven or Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, you've played a lot of that, and you are a huge fan, then like this is potentially, I'm going to come back to you for this, then this is potentially a good choice for you because you are and have gotten a lot of enjoyment out of it. I see the homage to Gloomhaven, and I see enough distinct tweaks to warrant it not just being more Gloomhaven. If you want just more Gloomhaven, you would have gotten Crimson Scales, right? But you want something a little bit different from Gloomhaven. I think that's where this will shine, in that like less overwhelming, more accessible genre. I think story-wise, I haven't seen enough of the story to know what these branching paths are on that last point of mine. So I'm not sure. But I do like the idea of reusing your enemies, right? I think both of these, neither of these play true solo. To recap, you ever do a little recap here in case you just skip to the end? Neither of these do true solo, but I think Rove would be easier to multi-hand because of the board decisions. I like the randomness of the dice. This is more dice driven with those random elements. There are less things for the monsters to do as well. If you only want your monster to be acting in a certain way, maybe this is a little bit better, a little bit more predictable in terms of how they act. In Gloomhaven, it's a bit more wild because you have that entire deck, a unique deck for each monster. And here you can actually see like the choices laid out for you. So if you want to do that pre-planning, you can. It's a little bit more solvable, let's say. So a little less random in that regard, but more random in the resolving. Maybe not. Maybe the same amount of random because the deck of cards and the dice, it's the same. It's just a way to generate probability. So yeah, there you go. Those are some differences between Gloomhaven and Rove. I've talked long enough. Drop down below what you think was actually good that I said. Or if you have your own differences, etc. And if you are a big Gloomhaven fan, tell me what you like about Rove and what you don't like about Rove, because I think that's a really good comparison. It's raised a bunch of money. It's doing quite well. So 284,000, that's pretty good. And still has 14 days to go. So this probably hit 500,000 maybe. Not enough to do a 5 reasons you shouldn't back, so I don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I think, I don't know if this was a good video or not. If it wasn't, I'm sorry. But I did my best. Those are the best sort of most salient points that jump out to me having played both games. And hopefully that was helpful if you're debating and if you like Gloomhaven or if you don't like Gloomhaven. I think for me, I would get this to the table more than Gloomhaven. So, and I wouldn't really miss the systems of Gloomhaven's that aren't represented in Rove, because it helps with that flow and speed of play and just engaging with the game rather than getting stopped by roadblocks. But I can also see that like some people love the multi-use cards and having 10 decisions to make and having those decisions whittled down, whereas in Rove you always have 7 cards up, right? They're double-sided, but you always have 7 choices, essentially. So there's a bit of a difference there. Anyway, thanks for watching. Drop your comments down below. I'm really excited to hear your input, especially because I know there are huge Gloomhaven fans out there. Anybody who played the Crimson Scales, let me know if there were any tweaks there that you see in Rove. I'm very curious about that. Thanks so much for watching. My name's Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase, and I think I got to 10, but if I didn't, I'm going to close my eyes and shout, so I'll never know.